On behalf of the North Capital Forum, Canciller, Secretaria de Relaciones Exteriores, Alicia Bárcena, Minister of Foreign Affairs, welcome. Welcome. I know this is your home, this is your office, but welcome to this panel.
Thank you.
And Børge Brende, President of the World Economic Forum, the Davos Forum, welcome to Mexico. I know you have been spending a couple of days in Mexico, but welcome back.
Thank you.
I saw you here like 10 years ago. I'm super happy to see you here again. I'm super happy on this conversation. I'll just kick it off. I think there's so much things to talk about on a global aspect and then regional aspect. I'm gonna start with Børge on a more global vision. And my first question, Børge, is what do you see as the most significant global tendencies shaping the world economic today?
So we're definitely in the most complex geopolitical and geoeconomic situation in decades. We are faced with a fragmented and polarized world, but I think still there are opportunities to build trust, and there are challenges that do travel without passport. Climate change, COVID, pandemics, and those challenges have to be dealt with by collaborating. And we even see that the G2, the so-called G2, US and China, is able to continue now their conversations on climate, on health. That's incredibly important. When it comes to this part of the world and Mexico, I'm in general very bullish on Mexico. I think Mexico has big opportunities, of course, with nearshoring and friendshoring. There is a lot of investments. I think there will be more investments also in the future in this country. Of course, it's all now also about the digital economy. We see that the digital economy is 15% of the global GDP, but is growing 2.5 times faster than the rest of the economy. So if Mexico is able to use this opportunity with reshaping of the global value chains to also produce higher up in the value chain and also digitalize and also introduce those reforms that are necessary to improve competitiveness, I think Mexico will even be more prosperous, even in a very challenging international landscape.
So new words in our vocabulary: reshuffle, relocalization, nearshoring, friendly shoring, ally shoring. A question for you, Canciller. Considering as one of the rising tendencies in the world economy, how does nearshoring or this supply relocalization impact economic development in Mexico?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for the very kind invitation. And I'm so pleased and honored to have Børge Brende with us. We are friends from a long time, and I'm very happy that we have him with us, because I think, by the way, that the World Economic Forum is a place where Mexico needs to be and discuss there many of these issues. And precisely the fragmented and divided world is something that we were discussing already in New York recently with leaders of the world. But let me come to your question about nearshoring and what does that mean for Mexico. First of all, I want to give you a number, and that is the trade between Mexico and the US last year was $855 billion. Wow. These are the updated figures from the Department of Commerce, really, from the US. So it's $855 billion, 100 billion more than it was initially calculated. That means that Mexico has become the first trading partner of the US. Foreign investment from the US to Mexico is 15 billion, last year. And this year only, we are already in 12 billion. Okay, so these are the figures. What are the opportunities, I think? First of all, the world is regionalizing because either pandemics, either the geopolitical crisis, the Ukraine-Russia crisis. So what's happening is that many companies are moving to this part of the world. Also because North America has become a very dynamic region. And for example, if the government of the US is issuing the CHIPS Act or the Inflation Act, ¿cómo se llama? The
IRA.
Anti-Inflation Act, which are, at the end of the day, incentives, very powerful incentives to bring industries to this part of the world. And for example, one of the areas in which there's going to be new opportunities is conductors and semiconductors. And the idea is that that's very relevant for the US because many parts of cars or everything were disrupted by the value chains because the crisis, the geopolitical crisis or the pandemics or whatever, there was a disruption of the value chains, particularly on this area of conductors and semiconductors. And the dependence on China, I think, was a big blow for the economy of the world. That doesn't mean that everything is now moving away, but a very good part of companies and I would say manufacturing are coming to this way. Now, why Mexico? I mean, it's coming not only to Mexico, also to the US and Canada, but why Mexico is being, I would say, creating a lot of opportunities. First of all, because no question about it, labor is cheaper here, although not as much as it was in the past, because now the minimum wage has been going up in this administration in a very pretty way, I think. So the conditions are there. And I think that the infrastructure that this government is building, the corridor, for example, let me just put that example. The government of Mexico is investing a lot of money on a very powerful project, which is connecting the Gulf of Mexico with the Pacific, Coatzacoalcos with Salina Cruz, with a train that is going to about 300 kilometers. And this is going to be an area where they are proposing 10 industrial parks, where we have already, I think, received a lot of interest from companies all over. Let me put you an example. Portugal, the prime minister of Portugal was here, and they want to be part of the two ports, you know, and they also want to be the part of the containers that are going to move from Coatzacoalcos to Salina Cruz and vice versa. And why Portugal? It's very interesting because Portugal, what they want is to connect Coatzacoalcos with the port of Sines in Europe. And what they want to bring is natural gas, actually, because Mexico has a super habit of natural gas, which probably we are not using that well, but anyway. But then Portugal wants to build a liquefaction, ¿cómo se dice? Una planta de liquefacción.
Liquefied plant.
Exactly, liquefying plant, and then take that gas to Portugal and be the entry point of Portugal wants to be the entry point of energy for Europe. Okay, so just as an example, but the other thing I see is that Europe, because of the USMCA, cannot only bring their goods as they did before. Now they need to invest here because the free trade agreement, you know, is in certain way, if you read it properly, you will see that you need to invest in one of the three countries to be able to participate in the value chains that are emerging. For example, electromobility is going to be a tremendous industry that is growing because, of course, the US, Mexico, and Canada, the only cars that we will be able to export in 2030, I guess, will have to be electric or no. So there are a lot of things happening that I think are relevant for the industry. So I think we have to think about it in the sense that Mexico is developing. I mean, let me tell you what is the dilemma we have today with the US, I guess. And we had a meeting yesterday. I was telling Børge Brende about what happened yesterday here with Tony Blinken and Ali Mayorkas and Mary Garland and Lee Sherwood, the White House. We had a meeting yesterday on the high-level dialogue on security. Last week, we have the high-level dialogue on economics. That's when we met in the CEO forum, you remember?
The DEAN, no?
The DEAN. And today was, and yesterday the DEA, so I don't know how to call it, but anyway. So all these acronyms that are...
But it's okay. Those are institutions. Those are...
Oh, yes. And so easy, you know, you can't imagine. We just discussed drugs, guns, fentanyl. I know, it was great, you know.
Those are the easy topics.
Absolutely fantastic. But anyway, but the dilemma, no, really, that's what it is. But the dilemma we have, and I stop there because you have many other questions to make to us.
We
but
do.
The real dilemma we have is whether the narrative of the US about Mexico bringing the army to the border and, you know, and a war with Mexico and that we are the worst of the worst, because we are the ones bringing fentanyl to the US and so forth. What, by the way, 95% of the fentanyl that is crossing in the US border, Mexico-US border, goes through legal pathways. These are not the migrants, huh? No, no, no. These are people that are carrying the fentanyl to the US. But anyway, but what I'm trying to say is whether we buy that narrative, inflammatory narrative, and we fall into that equation, or we really go to the other side of the equation, which is, I think, the most promising, which is to work on this binational opportunity, unique window of opportunity we have to build a very powerful economic area, a binational economic area. Because this is not an area where we are selling things. No, 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 no. We are producing together. And that's the real difference. It's not that Mexico is sending goods. No. Mexico sends goods. The goods come back. The goods go back again. So 40% of the goods that we are exporting, for example, to the US, more or less have a content of US or Canada. So this is already, I would say, an area where productivity and production and industries are totally connected. And I think this is something that, I think this is a great opportunity, frankly speaking. So let me stop there.
Børge, there's some geopolitical developments happening at the same time of many technology change, like electromobility, the EVs, or telecom, or the semiconductor industry. How these geopolitical developments and changes in big trends on technology are impacting global trade?
Thank you. Firstly, thank you also to Alicia. Great to have you here as the Foreign Minister of Mexico, my dear friend. And also that someone with such international experience can take on this position. I think first time we met, you were Chief of Staff of Kofi Annan.
Exactly. And you were the Minister of...
Environment of Norway.
Exactly. Oh, my God.
20 years ago.
So don't reveal our ages,
you
please.
know, time flies, but we're still here, huh?
Yes, yes,
Up and kicking.
Yes.
So,
and fighting for the same things,
yeah,
you know?
and the global value chains are still up and kicking. You know, we are trading more with each other globally than we did last year, but the growth in trade is not what it used to be. So the last months we even saw the global trade going a bit down. But for the last 3 decades, trade has been the engine behind growth. So trade has increased 4 times, while we have had the doubling of the global GDP. So we will have to be careful so we don't lose the baby with the bathwater when we are now also securing and updating our global value chains. But to your question about technology, if you look at the 2 largest economies in the world, the US, 25% of the global GDP, with 5% of the global population. China, 20% of the global GDP. So they're almost half of all that is produced in the world in these 2 countries. what is driving the competition between these two countries is also technology. They both know that those that are on top of AI, machine learning, synthetic biology, all electrical vehicles will also be the most powerful nation coming out of this century. So that competition will continue. And there will be areas where the trade will maybe not be as it was in the past between those two countries. I think very advanced semiconductors, technology that has dual use, maybe that's 10% of the current trade between the US and China. There, I don't think you will see growth, maybe the opposite. But still, they will trade 90% as in the past. Of course, this opens up for also opportunities for countries that are very close to the US, I mean, geographically, like Mexico. And it makes some sense also that you are nearshoring to a certain extent. Yeah. Because we saw during the COVID that just in time wasn't sufficient. You also have to think about just in case. But if you go too far in then producing everything in your own country or close to your own country, you will also see an increase in the prices of the input factors when you produce something. So there are two reasons why we also will continue, in my view, with a higher inflationary terrain in the years to come, is that the nearshoring also increases the prices of the input factors. And then the necessary green transition is also increasing the prices, because to go from coal and traditional fossil fuel to renewables and etc. will establish higher prices for energy. So both of those are components in this. But when it comes to technologies, we also have to look at the huge opportunities. I'm bullish on Mexico, but I'm also pretty bullish on the global economy in the years to come, because I think we're faced with the revolution in productivity. And productivity is prosperity. If you can produce the same with less resources, you can then produce more, or you can produce higher up in the value chain. And the implementation of AI and machine learning, we think at the World Economic Forum, will increase potentially the productivity in the world by 10% in the coming decade. That we have not seen for decades. And if we can implement that and do that, and also use the new technologies in the green transition, and also to meet the sustainable development goals and etc., then it's a huge opportunity for also increased prosperity. So this will be critical also when you look at the future-oriented industrial policy for economies. The digital part of it is incredibly important.
Thank you, Børge. Canciller, let me go to the global cooperation, strategic cooperation, and the role of Mexico internationally right now. We saw you traveling to, I think, Colombia and Chile last month. There are other countries, and Mexico is one of the most open countries for global trade, with many agreements, many free trade agreements. But what are those strategies of cooperation that we're looking for? They're on knowledge, for example, Israel, on software development, maybe India, on education, on food security, on many other things. What's your view on global cooperation?
Well, you see, I think we need to, first of all, I think we need to understand what are those areas in which we need to have global cooperation. Maybe not everything can be done through global cooperation. But one thing that needs global cooperation is climate change, for example. And there, I guess, technology is another important factor in it, because I don't think we're going fast enough in the energy transition in the world, for example. Yes, I think everybody's trying to do something, but I don't think we are going fast enough. And with the Russia-Ukraine crisis, I think many countries went back to the fossil fuel, to coal, even, I would say, exploring nuclear energy again, small reactors and things of the sort. So I guess that we have a challenge on energy that we need to understand. But climate change is something where we need really global support. Why is this? Many people say, why is climate change a global issue? Well, basically because all our emissions are going to the atmosphere. And wherever they are emitted, we all share the atmosphere. And we are very close to the 1.5 degrees. And this has been the hottest year since we have records in weather. So this is an area in which we need to achieve, and I hope soon, a global pact. Because the global south is very frustrated because they feel that the global north is not, I would say, is not fulfilling their promises of financing, no? And the expectation is to have $100 billion a year by several mechanisms. It could be SDRs, these, ¿cómo se llama? Special drawing rights, or it could be through concessional funding, etc. And what I feel is that the institutions are not ready for this tremendous, I would say, challenge. For example, the World Bank or the IMF have a lot of programs for least developed countries, but not for middle-income countries, which is where the problem is, anyway. But climate change is one. The other one, I guess, we need to work together is on the peace process. I guess the war on Ukraine, I mean, the invasion of Russia in Ukraine, and we are almost going to be 2 years since this crisis erupted. How come the world has not been able to come to grips with it? And what's happening is that, let me put you an example, the US is providing or will provide $400 billion with more arms, guns or military, etc., while the world is needing many other things, So I think we are in a place where we need to try to find ways. And I know that there are countries like Saudi Arabia, by the way, and Turkey that are trying to see if they can mediate, no? Because Zelensky proposed a 10-step plan or something like that. And but the problem is how you can negotiate a peace plan only with Ukraine. You need the other sitting there somehow. I mean, so anyway, but I think peace is a very relevant thing, and we are really in the brinks of a nuclear threat, because Zaporizhia, which is the plant, which is located in Ukraine but in the hands of Russia, it can become a very dangerous mechanism, and they are using it as una moneda de cambio. How do you say? As a exacto, no, for negotiating, and the world is just, what's the moment when this is going to no? So I think peace, but not peace in a ¿cómo te diré? In a abstract or inocente, ¿cómo se dice? Or naive, or in a naive way. We all want peace, the world peace. No, it's serious things on peace process, because otherwise we're going to have a lot of problems. And then, of course, as Børge was saying, we are living in a polarized world, in a fragmented world. So Mexico has to put attention to the things that are happening, for example, in Asia Pacific. And we're going to go to APEC in San Francisco. APEC is going to be a very important gathering because it's presided by the US, but China is confirming that China will be there. And I think Asia Pacific, and from Latin America, only very few countries are members of APEC. It's Mexico, is Chile, and Peru, punto. But we have to be there because Vietnam, for example, who's also coming, Vietnam is playing a very interesting role. Vietnam wants to become the provider of semiconductors for the US. And if Mexico doesn't put its act together soon, you know what I mean, Vietnam is going to come, en punto. So what do I think to be global players is always thinking about what's good for Mexico, no question about it, that's my role. But what can we do with Europe? Well, we need to sign the agreement with Europe. We need to modernize our agreement, our free trade or Acuerdo Global Modernizado. We have to get there. We definitely need a good relationship with Europe. How do we have a conversation with China and with India, you know? I would say our weakest part in the Mexican foreign policy is Africa. We really haven't developed, my view, a clear relationship with Africa, with few embassies and so forth. But I would say that global problems, migration is a global problem, but we have our regional problem here, but it's a global problem. So I think the world needs to sit down and see in the summit of the future that is going to happen next year, what are the issues we're going to discuss? And I think digital matters are also a global issue because it's about ethics, it's about the norms that we're going to use on artificial intelligence, and not only the technology itself, but how are we going to use this technology? What are the rules of the game? So anyway, I think technology is another matter that we need to look. But Mexico basically is looking at Europe, is looking at Asia Pacific, and that's why APEC is so relevant. And I think if China and the US are going to coincide in San Francisco, this is going to be very interesting. You see, at least I want to be there, no question. Anyway, I really want to be there, no, to watch and see. Because also Xi Jinping, I think, has come to the World Economic Forum, and he's probably coming.
He was in 2017, and we hope for a very strong Chinese delegation in January, as we hope for a very strong Mexican delegation under your leadership in January too.
Well,
so maybe it's where China and Mexico will meet.
I tell you, of course, you know.
And Vietnam and Mexico.
I know Vietnam is very important. For me, believe me, I think Vietnam is playing a very interesting role. And of course, Korea, Japan, the typical, no? But let's go to those who are similar to us. You know, Vietnam has a niche that we need to look into, I guess. Let's see.
Jorge, let me stay with the climate change topic. You yesterday gave us very good numbers on this. Climate change represents a critical global challenge. How can organizations and governments work together to advance climate objectives and foster sustainability?
That's a long speech, but I guess that's not what you're looking for now. So let me try to capture it in a nutshell. We're really faced with the triangle of challenges. One is access to energy, electricity. Still like 800 million people on our planet don't have basic electricity. So you have to have access to electricity. Then we have an energy security. And we've seen this in Europe this last winter, that energy security is also critical. And then the third part of the triangle is decoupling growth in electricity and energy from growth in CO2 emissions. So you have to decouple. So this is kind of like not anymore squaring a circle, but squaring a triangle. I think it's doable because what we're also seeing now that the cost of inaction exceeds the cost of action. We are seeing that climate change is really having huge economic impact on our planet. So it cannot continue business as usual. But we have to then pivot from having built an industrial revolution for 200 years on fossil fuels to a future that is more about different energy sources, but making sure that we keep up the economic growth and prosperity at the same time. And I think there are many components here. Alicia mentioned, for example, natural gas. I think we have to be so realistic that natural gas has to be a bridge. Natural gas emits half of what coal does. So for the coming decades, we also need natural gas as a bridge. I think also nuclear will be seen with different eyes in countries that have that potential. It will not solve the problem, but it will be a component in the new energy picture. We also have fusion in the future, not the first decade, but in 2 decades maybe. Also carbon capture and storage, that is an important part of the IRA, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. Some people would say it's anything else than that. But anyway, as Secretary Yellen says, it's a modern supply-side economics. So carbon capture and storage will mean that you can continue with fossil fuel for some decades as long as you can capture it and re-inject it. Today, it's far too expensive. So we have to drive down the price. But I'm not so pessimistic as I mentioned to you yesterday, Enrique, and also the team that I spoke to. Is like, if we met 10 years ago and I was sitting here with Alicia and I was saying, the price of solar would fall to 1/10 and the price of wind would fall to 1/7, I think most of you said that guy is very blue-eyed and too optimistic. But that's not the reality. You can roll out solar and wind without any kind of subsidies because it's competitive. It's cheaper than fossil fuel in most places in the world. So we also have to build this on major technology breakthroughs in the years to come. But we will have to change. And today, there is no global prize in this field. You haven't internalized the externalities. And that's what's difficult, because it's hard to agree on that. And then Alicia's point about the global south, we have to be very serious about it. But if this division continues and there is lack of trust, this is not sustainable. And we have to deliver Copenhagen 15 years later at the COP28 in the UAE. World leaders promised $100 billion in energy transformation in developing countries. We're still not there 15 years later. That's unacceptable. It really is. We have to walk the talk.
Thank you, Børge. We have 7 minutes, and I have a couple of questions here, but I want to cover the gender equity initiatives. And I'll go with you, Canciller. In the context of Mexico, how can the government, how can public policy and corporate strategies be effectively employed to advance gender equity in leadership roles and across various industries as a fundamental driver of economic development?
Well, thank you for the question. I think this is a very important question. And first of all, because women are not a minority. Women is half or even more than the population. And I believe that the incorporation of women to the labor can bring considerable proportions of GDP. So, but we have to overcome quite a lot of barriers. And one of them is I would say the care economy, which means that women have to stay back home. And we saw this in the pandemics. The losses of jobs by women were immense, larger than any others, because many women had to go back home, leave their jobs to take care of their families, their kids, their elders, etc. So we have this challenge of the care economy to bring really women to the front line and to make the possibility of providing what I would call economic autonomy. For me, this autonomy of women is essential. If you don't have economic autonomy, it's very difficult to get the other autonomies, because the other autonomy is the physical autonomy, the right on your own body to decide. No, men decide for us, No, we are the ones who have to decide for ourselves, I don't want women to be more powerful than men. I only want women to be powerful, punto, punto. I don't want, you see? No kidding, So, but you cannot get physical autonomy, and that's why you have so much violence, because women are so dependent sometimes of their households that they have to stay and stay and stay. And they are sometimes violated, and violence against women, we have to fight. But you need economic autonomy, my view, no? And then political and decision making. I think we need more women in decision making. When you have a team of people where women are part of it, you have a totally different approach to decision making. Really, a totally different approach. Why? Because we are different. And I don't want to say we only want to have teams of women, but we need women in the teams. We have complementary perspectives in many fronts and competences that make us do a lot of things. So where do I think we can do a lot in Mexico is, first of all, we have well, I have announced a gender, ¿cómo se dice? Foreign, espérate, ¿cómo se llama? Exacto, exacto. Una política exterior feminista, ¿no? Feminist foreign policy. What does that mean? First of all, the gender issues are not going to be in an office in the, I don't know which floor. No, it's going to be with me to make it I'm going to have somebody that is really there with a team looking at all the opportunities. And what are the opportunities? Number one, to make sure that women and men have the same opportunities and the same salaries. Because we still have a problem where women are earning 30% less doing the same jobs. And not in this Cancilleria, but maybe, I don't know. But in many companies, this is happening. So we have to look at this. And then we need women, we need parity in many of the jobs that we have, not only at the top, because I think, for example, in the UN, I think Antonio Guterres really got there to have gender parity in the high-level positions, but what about the rest, you know? And in Mexico, curiously, people say that López Obrador doesn't like women, but this is the most parity cabinet you have ever seen. We are all women there. Well, not all of us, but many of us, you know? Economy and energy and social esto y me, and we're a lot of women. So suddenly the president comes out and says, you are a lot of women here, right? You see, but it's true, and it changes. It really does. So anyway, so parity. But the other thing I think is so important is to incorporate the gender perspective in the international treaties, in the free trade agreements, in the modernized, in the new generation of free trade agreements. We need to include the gender perspective. We need to include it in the climate change, in the biodiversity, in the things we are negotiating. Of course, in the economic perspectives, we need women, you know? Yeah. So I guess that this feminist foreign policy for me means a lot. I think it's not only, as I said, about the jobs inside the foreign ministry, but also about how do we provide a gender perspective. And there are very few countries in the world that we're doing this. France, well, not very few, actually. I don't know if you were there, but in New York, the General Assembly, we had a meeting with all the governments that have feminist policies, feminist foreign policy, and we were like 15. I mean, out of 193 governments, I know. But anyway, at least we were 15. And 2 of them were men. So that was already improvement. But I mean, the foreign ministers doing this, men. So I thought that was already something. So I think we have to push for this a lot because it's good for the economy, it's very good for the society, and we have to move towards a society of care, not an economy of care, the society. Because why is it the role of women? Just give me a break. I mean, everybody has to become a caretaker of the children, our legacy, our elder, our past. Our children, I mean, the legacies are our elders, our children, our future, you know, our society, our public goods, the environment. We need to care for all these things. So we need a care society. So that's what I'm pushing for.
I'll stay with the same question for you, Børge. I want your thoughts on these gender equity initiatives.
So first, kudos to Alicia's leadership on this. I think it's very important. Unfortunately, we are globally seeing also some setbacks in the area of gender that I never thought we were going to see. For example, looking at Afghanistan now, where women and girls, women cannot work, outside the home, and girls have to end their education. Girls that had, or women that had only half a year left on their education for becoming a medical doctor had to quit. Girls are not allowed into schools. And if this was like a one-off, but we are seeing the things that we have achieved also through different UN conventions and etc. when it comes to women's and the rights of girls are under pressure. So we will have to be very, very firm on that. On the more economic aspect, that is maybe what one expects from the World Economic Forum, is that gender parity also makes sense economically. I think it's a human right, so it should not be up for discussion. We should have full gender equality. But those countries that have women participating fully in the workforce too are generally countries that are much more prosperous. You know, and if you have 80% of women taking part in the workforce, you have much more taxpayers, you have much more also prosperity in your society, more people also paying for future taxes. And there are a lot of countries that have big potential in this area. So gender parity for me, it's a basic human value, but it's also extremely good for the economy. And we see companies that also do have gender parity in their leadership, not only in their supervisory boards, because there we have seen a big development, but we still see companies lagging behind when it comes to their executive boards, managing boards. Those companies that are doing well on having also gender balance or gender parity are also generally companies that are more profitable. You know, 50% of the customers are also women. So if you then run a company with only men, you will not be able to decipher and understand how half of your potential consumers are thinking. So, and we know from also myself in cabinets and different boards, I think it just works much better when there is different genders and a gender balance in a group or in a board. It's just natural. You know, last time I was in government in Norway, I joked that I was a result of affirmative action, because the prime minister was a woman, finance minister was a woman, and then they probably thought, oh, if the foreign minister also was a woman, maybe it was too much. So then I got the job, you know. So I would say that when you grow up in a society like in Norway, where there is a majority of women, for example, in the cabinet, when I was in the cabinet, you don't think about it. You take it as like given. You know, it's not a question of gender, it's a question of the individual. But we have still a long way to go. In advanced economies, we're moving in the right direction, but I'm very worried about what we're seeing in some developing countries, and also where religion is used as an excuse for not bringing women and giving them their rights. All girls have the same rights to be educated as young boys.
Thank you, Børge.
Yes.
Canciller, I'll ask you for a final thoughts on this session to close the session.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Enrique. I think these type of discussions are very useful and very good, because it permits you to, in certain way, to build or to discover new ideas together, right? Because that's the whole idea of having interaction like we are having today. I want to say that I think that you, as the U.S.-Mexico Foundation, I think you had to have Børge Brende with us today is great. And Marisol, of course.
Marisol.
Yes. Because, yes, Marisol Argueta
Former foreign minister of El Salvador.
Exactly. She was the foreign minister of El Salvador. And she has, and she's I would say, the secret weapon of the World Economic Forum in Latin America and the Caribbean, to tell you the truth. So you better get close to a secret. Not so secret anymore, but anyway, but I just disclose it. But if anybody wants to go to the World Economic Forum, contact Marisol. No, I mean, yes, absolutely. No, I'm not kidding. And why I'm saying this is because these type of forums, like the one we are having right now, the North Capital Forum, I saw the program and I was so envious. I thought, what am I doing here discussing drugs, guns, and everything? Why can't I be on the other end, with you guys, instead of having, the fentanyl, the whatever, which is very important, Roberto no says no. But
we were talking about gastronomy and the World Cup and public diplomacy.
There now, huh?
Yes, but the thing is that you guys, who are here today, we really have to build this North American region together. We really need your help, because this is not going to be a governmental question only. The government has to put its part, and sometimes we are quite difficult, but we should be partners in crime. And our crime has to be to build a community, a business community, an economic community, a social community, an environmental, the transition that we're talking about, energy transition, the solutions based on nature, the amount of opportunities we have with technology and so forth. I think we really need to do these things together. And I'm so happy that you really conducted this forum, because I know it's not only a North American forum. I know that you have many other people from other parts of the world, but this is the North Capital Forum, and I think this is a place where we, in a certain way, we can discuss things like this in an open forum, but also in the smaller formats, in dinners, in breakfast, and so forth. So congratulations for this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming to La Cancillería, because if I couldn't go to the forum came to me. So thank you. That's very nice of you, really.
Thank you so much, Canciller.
And feel at home. Really feel at home. My colleagues are here. The Ambassador Esteban Moctezuma is here. ¿Cómo se llama? Ay, a ver, consuls. Levanten la mano, válgame Dios. No, bueno. Hey. No. This is very important because we have 53 consulates in the United States. I think it's the biggest, largest network. So I'm very glad that you're here, guys, because we need you, and we want to transmit to you and through you to our Mexican communities abroad that we are really lobbying very hard to get them on board and to resolve their problems of being undocumented, because we have Mexicans in the US that are very good economically, producing a lot, but they don't have documents. 10, 20, 30 years people that have been living there. So we've been working very hard. So you need to help us, and I hope that we can come together and talk about that a little bit. But anyway, thank you. Thank you for bringing the consuls. Thank you for bringing all these people to La Cancillería, and please feel free to come anytime. We are really here to provide services to all of you. Thank you so
Canciller.
much.
We're gonna... Thank you so much. We had almost 51 activities, panels, roundtables, discussions. We still have 2 sessions here at your office with the Mexican business sector. The title of this session is Solo una vez. It's a Mexican moment. I know it's not only one time, but this opportunity, I think it is once in a lifetime. So I see already Francisco Cervantes and Juan Cortina and Pepe Medina Mora, Julio Carranza. I see Alejandro Ramirez, who is our our co-chair for this event from the Mexican side, and Gabriela Marketing, who will conduct the next session. So thank you so much. Thank you so much again. Børge, thank you for coming to Mexico.
Oh, yes.